My name is Hope, 28 years old, working as a marketing manager in Boston. I grew up in a middle-class family with my younger brother Jackson. Thanks to my hard work and determination, I built a stable and independent life for myself. But 3 years ago, my parents dropped a bombshell that shattered our relationship. After years of silence, they suddenly reached out last week. The reason behind their unexpected return left me questioning everything about family loyalty and self-worth. Before I share my story about family obligations and finding my own value, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, my childhood looked normal from the outside. My parents, Diana and Thomas, created a home that prioritized achievement above all else. From my earliest memories, they pushed me academically while maintaining a noticeably more relaxed attitude toward my younger brother, Jackson. "Hope we expect straight A's from you this semester," my mother would say while reviewing my report card. Meanwhile, when Jackson brought home C's and the occasional D, the response was dramatically different. "Boys will be boys." My father would shrug. "As long as he passes, that's what matters." This double standard became our family norm. I accepted it as reality and channeled my energy into excelling. Throughout high school, I maintained a perfect GPA, participated in numerous extracurricular activities, and worked part-time jobs to save for college. My dedication paid off when I received a partial scholarship to a state university. Even with the scholarship, college expenses were substantial, so I worked 30 hours weekly at a local cafe while maintaining my academic standing. "You need to learn responsibility," my mother told me when I asked if they might help with textbook costs during my sophomore year when my hours were cut. "Figure it out yourself." And I did. I graduated debt-free through sheer determination, careful budgeting, and countless sleepless nights balancing work and studies. After graduation, I moved to Boston and secured an entry-level marketing position at a growing tech company. My starting salary was modest, but I lived frugally, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates and continuing my habit of careful financial planning. By age 25, my career trajectory had accelerated. 3 promotions in 4 years allowed me to move into my own apartment, a modest but comfortable one-bedroom in Somerville. I had built a small emergency fund, started contributing to retirement accounts, and occasionally treated myself to small luxuries like weekend trips to the coast or dinner at nice restaurants with friends. Throughout this time, my relationship with my family remained cordial but distant. We spoke monthly by phone, and I visited on major holidays, bringing gifts that often stretched my budget. These visits always followed the same pattern: conversations focused on my career progress, and inevitably shifting to complaints about financial struggles at home. The first serious tension appeared when Jackson graduated high school, with unremarkable grades and even less remarkable ambition. Unlike me, he had no clear plans and had put minimal effort into scholarship applications. "He just needs to find himself," my mother explained during one of our calls. "Not everyone can be naturally driven like you." What started as occasional requests for family support grew more frequent. First, it was helping with the family car repair. Then it was contributing to the new roof. I helped when I could, though it often meant dipping into my carefully built savings. "Family helps family" became my father's constant refrain whenever I hesitated or asked questions about their financial management. 3 years ago, Jackson finally decided he wanted to attend college after working various minimum wage jobs for 2 years after high school. He applied to several private universities, known more for their social scene than academic rigor, and was accepted to one with a staggering annual tuition of $45,000. When my parents called to invite me to dinner to discuss something important, I had no idea how dramatically my life was about to change. I spent the entire week looking forward to that dinner. I bought new clothes for the occasion, a navy blue dress that I thought looked professional yet family appropriate. I even purchased gifts for everyone: a bottle of my father's favorite whiskey, a silk scarf for my mother, and concert tickets for a band Jackson had mentioned liking. We met at Giovanni's, an Italian restaurant that had been the setting for special family occasions throughout my childhood. Walking in, I spotted my parents and brother already seated at a corner table. Mom waved enthusiastically while Dad stood to give me a brief hug. You look successful, he said with an approving nod looking at my dress. Thanks, Dad, I replied, sliding into the empty chair across from Jackson, who barely looked up from his phone to acknowledge my arrival. The first half hour felt surprisingly pleasant. We ordered appetizers bruschetta and calamari and caught up on surface-level life updates. Mom showed me pictures of their neighbor's new baby. Dad complained about local road construction. Jackson occasionally added comments about friends from high school. As our entrees arrived, the conversation subtly shifted toward finances. The property taxes went up again this year, Dad mentioned between bites of his lasagna. Almost unmanageable now. Mom nodded in agreement. And the car needed another repair last month. $2,000 just gone like that. I made sympathetic noises while cutting my chicken parmesan. These complaints were standard fare at family gatherings. I had learned to listen without offering immediate solutions. But we have some exciting news too, Mom said, brightening suddenly. Jackson has been accepted to Westfield University. That's great, I replied, genuinely happy for my brother. Congratulations, Jackson. He mumbled a thanks, still focused more on his phone than the conversation. We're so proud, Dad continued. It's a prestigious school, exactly what he needs to get his life on track. I nodded, taking a sip of my wine. Do they have scholarship options? Financial aid? My parents exchanged a look that I would soon understand all too well. Well, my mother began carefully folding her napkin. That's actually what we wanted to discuss with you tonight. My father cleared his throat. Hope you've done very well for yourself. We always knew you would. And now Jackson needs some support to get started on his path. I nodded slowly, a faint alarm bell ringing in the back of my mind. We've looked at the numbers. Mom continued, pulling out a folder I hadn't noticed she'd brought. Westfield costs $45,000 a year for tuition plus living expenses. We can manage to contribute about 25%, but we were hoping you could cover the rest. The request hung in the air as I tried to process what they were asking. 75% of Jackson's expenses would amount to nearly $40,000 annually for 4 years, over $150,000 total. I stammered, trying to gather my thoughts. That's a significant amount of money. You're doing well at your job, Dad said matter-of-factly. You live alone, no kids, no real expenses. I have a 1-bedroom apartment and student loans, I corrected automatically. And I'm saving for my future. Family helps family, Mom said, repeating Dad's favorite phrase. We sacrificed everything for you growing up. I worked through college, I reminded them gently. I paid my own way. Only because we raised you to be responsible, Dad countered. Jackson just has different strengths. Jackson finally looked up from his phone. Not everyone is a workaholic like you, Hope. I tried to suggest alternatives, community college for 2 years to save money, student loans, work-study programs, or applying for scholarships even at this late date. Each suggestion was immediately dismissed. Community college. That's for people without potential, Mom scoffed. Student loans. We don't want him starting life in debt, Dad argued. He needs the full university experience, Mom insisted, the networking, the connections. After an hour of circular conversation, I took a deep breath and gave them my answer. I can help with some expenses, I offered. Maybe $5,000 a year. But I simply cannot afford to pay for the majority of Jackson's education. The temperature at the table seemed to drop 20 degrees instantly. My mother's face hardened, while my father's turned an alarming shade of red. I see, Dad said coldly. So your brother's future means nothing to you. That's not what I said, I protested. I'm offering what I can reasonably afford. After everything we've done for you? Mom whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Dad placed his napkin on the table with deliberate slowness. Then you're not really part of this family. The drive home that night was a blur of tears and disbelief. I called Amanda, my best friend since college, who listened as I sobbed through the details of the dinner. They're manipulating you, she said firmly. No reasonable parents would demand that. Over the next week, the calls and texts were relentless. Mom sent daily emotional messages about family loyalty and how I was breaking her heart. Dad's communications were shorter and more threatening references to being written out of their will suggestions that I would regret my selfishness reminders of all they had sacrificed for me. Jackson sent a single text, "Thanks for ruining my future." The following Sunday, I drove to my parents' house, hoping for a calmer, more reasonable discussion. Instead, I walked into an ambush. Both parents and Jackson sat in the living room, a united front. "We've thought about your response," Dad began without preamble, "and we've come to a decision. Either you help your brother as we've asked, or you are no longer welcome in this family." "You can't be serious," I whispered. "Entirely serious." Mom confirmed, her voice oddly flat. "Family means sacrifice. If you're not willing to sacrifice for us, you're not family." "I am offering to help," I insisted. "Just not the full amount you're demanding." "Not good enough," Dad snapped. "All or nothing." I looked at Jackson, hoping for some support, some recognition of how unreasonable this was. Instead, he stared back with cold detachment. "I always knew you were selfish," he said. "You and your perfect grades and perfect job. You think you're better than everyone." Fighting back tears, I made my choice. I cannot financially support Jackson's entire education. "I'm sorry, but that's my final answer." "Then leave," Dad said, pointing to the door. "And don't bother coming back or calling. You're no daughter of mine." As I walked out that door, I had no idea it would be 3 years before I heard from any of them again. The first weeks after being disowned felt like moving through quicksand. Basic tasks like showering or making dinner required monumental effort. Sleep eluded me, replaced by endless loops of the confrontation playing in my mind. Despite my attempts to maintain normalcy, my work performance suffered noticeably. "Hope, is everything okay?" my supervisor Angela asked after I missed a deadline for the third time that month. "This isn't like you." I broke down in her office, the professional facade crumbling as I explained my family situation between sobs. To my surprise, Angela responded with compassion rather than judgment. "Take the rest of the week off," she said gently. "And when you come back, we'll discuss reducing your workload temporarily while you get some help." Her kindness was the push I needed to schedule my first therapy appointment. Dr. Melissa Frazier specialized in family trauma, and our weekly sessions became an anchor in the stormy sea of my emotions. "What you're experiencing is similar to grief," she explained during our second session. "Even though your family members are still alive, you've lost your relationship with them and the version of family you thought you had." Those early months were sustained by the unwavering support of my friends. Amanda regularly appeared at my apartment with groceries and comfort food, sometimes simply sitting with me in silence when conversation felt impossible. David, a colleague from work, organized small group outings that provided much-needed distraction without overwhelming social pressure. "You're going to get through this," Amanda assured me during a particularly dark evening 6 weeks after the disownment, "and you'll come out stronger." At the time, her words felt like empty platitudes, but slowly, painfully, I began reconstructing my life. Dr. Fraser helped me identify and establish healthier boundaries in all relationships. I developed a self-care routine that included daily journaling, weekend hikes in nearby conservation areas, and a weekly pottery class that allowed me to focus entirely on creating something with my hands, rather than ruminating on painful thoughts. The first holiday season alone was brutal. Thanksgiving arrived with a flood of childhood memories and the harsh reality that I had nowhere to go. Amanda invited me to her family gathering, but I declined, not yet ready to witness someone else's functional family dynamics. Instead, I volunteered at a local homeless shelter, serving meals alongside other volunteers, who for various reasons were also without family celebrations. "First time volunteering?" asked Maria, a 60-something woman who efficiently directed the mashed potato distribution. "Yes," I admitted. "I needed somewhere to be today." She nodded with understanding. "Family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes it's who you find along the way." That simple statement became a guiding principle as I gradually built what therapists call a chosen family. I deepened existing friendships and cultivated new ones through volunteer work and community activities. These connections, based on mutual respect and genuine caring, rather than obligation or manipulation, slowly filled the void left by my biological family's rejection. Social media became both a comfort and a torment during this period. I couldn't bring myself to unfriend or block my family members, and occasionally found myself scrolling through their posts late at night. Jackson's college life looked exactly as one might expect: frequent parties, spring break trips, and very few academic achievements. My parents posted family holiday photos where my absence was conspicuously unmentioned. Each image reopened barely healed wounds. In therapy, I worked through complicated, contradictory emotions: the persistent love for my family despite their rejection, anger at their manipulation, guilt over saying no, and grief for the relationship I had always hoped we might eventually have. The hardest part of this journey, Dr. Fraser told me, is accepting that you cannot control their behavior or choices. You can only control your response. A breakthrough came nearly a year after the disownment. During a particularly intense therapy session, I finally recognized the lifetime pattern of emotional manipulation and uneven expectations that had defined our family dynamics. I was never valued as a daughter, I realized aloud. I was valued as a resource, a source of achievement they could brag about, and eventually a source of financial support. This painful clarity was ultimately liberating. My worth wasn't tied to my usefulness to my family. I had value simply as a human being deserving of respect and reasonable boundaries. With this new understanding, I channeled my energy into creating meaning from my experience. I began volunteering with a nonprofit organization that provided scholarship guidance and mentoring to first-generation college students. Helping these motivated young people navigate the complex world of higher education funding without family support felt like transforming my pain into purpose. It was through this volunteer work that I met James, a financial advisor who also gave his time to the organization. Thoughtful and perceptive, he listened more than he spoke and showed genuine interest in others' experiences. Our friendship developed naturally over several months of Saturday morning advising sessions. "Would you like to grab coffee after we finish here?" he asked one day, his usual confidence momentarily wavering. That coffee date extended into lunch, and by evening, I found myself sharing more of my story than I had with anyone outside my closest friends and therapist. James listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions and offering perspectives without prescribing solutions. "What struck me most about your story," he said, as we finally prepared to leave the cafe, "is your compassion. Despite everything, you never speak with bitterness about your family." His observation surprised me, as I had spent so long focusing on my anger and hurt. Yet he was right in a fundamental way. Beneath the pain, I still hoped they would find happiness and fulfillment. I just no longer believed it was my responsibility to provide it. As the first anniversary of my disownment approached, I decided to mark it intentionally, rather than letting it ambush me with grief. I took the day off work, bought a beautiful leather-bound journal, and spent hours writing reflections on the year, the growth, the continuing pain, and my hopes for the future. I concluded with a letter to myself affirming my worth and the difficult but necessary choice I had made. That evening, sitting on my small balcony watching the sunset, I experienced a moment of unexpected peace. My life wasn't perfect, but it was authentically mine. I was building connections based on mutual respect, rather than obligation, pursuing work that mattered to me, and learning to trust my own judgment. For perhaps the first time, I felt not just resignation about my family situation, but a genuine, if bittersweet, acceptance. The second year after being cut off from my family brought substantial positive changes to my life. My dedicated work and creative marketing campaigns earned me a promotion to Senior Marketing Director, complete with a corner office and significant salary increase. The financial stability this provided further validated my decision to establish firm boundaries with my family. My relationship with James evolved from casual dating to something deeply meaningful. Unlike previous partners who grew uncomfortable with my family situation, James understood the complexity of family trauma from his work with clients navigating financial family disputes. "Healthy love doesn't come with a price tag," he would say, reinforcing what had taken me so long to understand. With my improved financial situation, I moved from my Somerville apartment to a spacious two-bedroom condo in Cambridge. The second bedroom became a home office, though James occasionally teased that I was subconsciously preparing for future changes. It could make a nice guest room, he suggested one evening as we painted the walls a calming sage green. Or something else someday. I knew what he was implying, and the thought no longer triggered the panic it once might have. After years of seeing family as a source of pain, I was beginning to imagine the possibility of creating a healthy family of my own someday. This period of personal growth and stability was interrupted by an unexpected encounter at a local grocery store. I was comparing olive oils when someone called my name. Turning, I found myself face to face with Mrs. Winters, my parents' longtime neighbor. "Hope, what a surprise," she exclaimed, embracing me before I could react. "It's been ages. How are you, dear?" We exchanged pleasantries as my mind raced, uncertain how much she knew about my family situation or what questions might follow. Mrs. Winters had always been kind to me growing up, occasionally providing refuge when tensions at home became too much. "Have you been back to visit recently?" she asked innocently, unaware of the weight her question carried. "No," I answered carefully. "We haven't been in touch for a while." Her expression shifted subtly. "Oh, I assumed. With everything going on, you might have reconciled." "Everything going on?" I echoed, my stomach tightening. Mrs. Winters looked uncomfortable, clearly realizing she had ventured into sensitive territory. "Well, I probably shouldn't gossip, but since your family—" She lowered her voice. "Jackson dropped out of college after just 3 semesters. Such a shame after all the sacrifices to send him there." The news hit me with unexpected force. Jackson had abandoned the very education that had cost me my family relationship. Mrs. Winters continued, unaware of my internal turmoil. "Your parents took out quite a few loans for his tuition. They've been struggling to make the payments since he came back home. Thomas even took a second job for a while." We parted ways shortly after, with promises to stay in touch that both of us knew were unlikely to be kept. Driving home, my emotions cycled between vindication and concern. The situation confirmed my suspicions about Jackson's commitment, yet I took no pleasure in my family's financial difficulties. That evening, I called Dr. Fraser and scheduled an emergency session. "I feel guilty for feeling validated," I admitted during our conversation. "Like I'm a terrible person for thinking I told you so." "Having complex emotions doesn't make you terrible," she assured me. "It makes you human. The important question is, does this new information change what you want to do?" The answer came surprisingly easily. No. While I felt compassion for their situation, reopening communication would likely lead to more financial demands rather than genuine reconciliation. The boundaries I had established remained necessary for my well-being. As months passed, I occasionally heard updates about my family through mutual connections. Jackson had cycled through various career interests, from real estate to brewing to app development, never sticking with anything long enough to establish himself. My parents had taken out a second mortgage to manage the education debt they'd accumulated. Despite these concerning reports, my own life continued to flourish. James and I celebrated 1 year together with a weekend trip to a coastal Maine bed and breakfast. Meeting his family had been a revelation. His parents' supportive, respectful relationship with their adult children showed me what healthy family dynamics could look like. At work, I led a marketing campaign for a sustainable technology product that exceeded all performance metrics, earning recognition from the company's executive leadership. My volunteer work expanded to include developing a financial literacy program for the scholarship students, combining my professional skills with personal passion. "You've created quite an impressive life," Amanda commented during a girls' night at my condo 2.5 years after the disownment. "Sometimes the worst things lead to the best rebuilding." Her observation resonated deeply. The pain of losing my family had forced me to re-examine every aspect of my life and consciously choose what to include in my rebuilt world. Then came the email that shattered my hard-won equilibrium. Nearly 3 years after our last conversation, my mother's name appeared in my inbox with the subject line, "Family Matter." The message was brief and notably lacking any apology. "Hope, we need to discuss an urgent family situation. Please call when you can. Mom." The familiar anxiety returned instantly, a physical response of racing heart and constricted breathing that I had not experienced in months. I called Amanda immediately, then James needing their grounding presence as I processed this unexpected contact. You don't owe them an immediate response or any response at all, James reminded me, his voice calm and steady through the phone. Take time to decide what you want, Amanda urged. Don't just react. I decided to wait a week before deciding whether to respond. During that time, I journaled extensively, had 2 sessions with Dr. Fraser, and carefully considered what boundaries would be necessary if I chose to reestablish contact. 6 days after my mother's message, before I had reached a decision, a second email arrived, this one from my father. The tone was noticeably different, almost desperate. Hope, please call us, it's important. Dad. Seeing my usually stoic father pleading triggered both concern and suspicion. What could be so urgent after 3 years of silence? After much deliberation, and with both James and Dr. Fraser supporting my decision, I decided to make the call, but strictly on my terms. The morning of the call, my hands trembled as I prepared my coffee. James had stayed overnight, promising to remain nearby during the conversation, without directly participating unless I asked. Remember your boundaries, he said, squeezing my shoulder gently. You can end the call anytime you need to. At exactly 10 o'clock, I dialed my parents' number, a sequence still memorized despite years of disuse. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice simultaneously familiar and strange. Hope, is that really you? Yes, it's me, I replied, striving for a neutral tone. I got your emails about an urgent matter. An awkward silence followed, filled with 3 years of unspoken words. Finally, she continued, her voice strained. We've been trying to manage on our own, but things have gotten complicated. What kind of complications? I asked, directly unwilling to be drawn into vague discussions. She sighed heavily. Your father has been diagnosed with coronary artery disease. He needs bypass surgery, and our insurance only covers a portion of the costs. The specialist and hospital are out of network. The news was genuinely concerning, health issues being something I wouldn't wish on anyone. Yet I noticed her immediate focus on the financial aspects rather than the emotional impact. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. How is he doing? Struggling, working too much still, even though the doctor advised against it. We can't afford for him to stop. And Jackson? I asked, noticing his absence from her explanation. A slight pause. He's living at home again. He's had a difficult time finding his path. The job market is challenging for someone without a degree. The irony of this statement wasn't lost on me. I see. And you haven't been in touch for 3 years, but now you're reaching out because... Hope, my mother interrupted, her tone sharpening. I know you're upset about the past, but this is your father's health we're talking about. Family needs to come together in times of crisis. The familiar guilt trip triggered an immediate emotional response, but years of therapy had prepared me for this moment. I understand Dad's situation is serious, I replied calmly. But I need to address the elephant in the room. You and Dad disowned me 3 years ago when I couldn't pay for Jackson's education. You said I wasn't part of the family anymore. What's changed? Her response was defensive and evasive, filled with justifications about how they were just upset and didn't really mean it. No acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused, no genuine apology for the rejection. After 15 minutes of circular conversation, I made a decision. I think we should continue this discussion in person, I said firmly. But I'm not coming alone, and I'm not comfortable meeting at your house after what happened last time. We can meet at Riverside Cafe on Saturday at noon. I'll be bringing James, my partner. My mother agreed, though her tone suggested she wasn't pleased with my conditions. As soon as the call ended, the emotional weight crashed over me. James held me as I processed the complex mixture of anger, concern, hurt, and lingering love that this contact had stirred up. Saturday arrived with gray skies that matched my mood. James and I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early to secure a table in a quiet corner. When my parents walked in, the physical changes in them shocked me. My father, once robust and commanding, appeared gaunt and significantly older. My mother had visibly aged as well, her carefully maintained appearance now showing signs of prolonged stress. Their eyes widened slightly upon seeing James beside me, though they made polite introductions. Jackson was notably absent. He didn't want to come, my mother explained when I inquired. He's been going through a difficult period. The initial conversation was stilted and superficial comments about the weather, the cafe's renovations since I'd last been there, brief details about my father's health condition. Finally, after the server had taken our orders and departed, my father cleared his throat. Hope your mother tells me you want to discuss the past before we address our current situation. His phrasing was telling our current situation as though we shared the problem equally despite years of separation. Yes, I confirmed. 3 years ago, you told me I wasn't your daughter anymore because I couldn't pay for Jackson's education. You cut me out of your lives completely. That's not something we can just ignore. My father shifted uncomfortably, looking down at his coffee. We were upset. Perhaps we overreacted. Perhaps, James muttered beside me, earning a sharp look from my mother. We did what we thought was best for the family at the time, my mother added defensively. By disowning your daughter? I asked quietly. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Finally, my father sighed. I was wrong, he admitted reluctantly. We were wrong. Is that what you need to hear? Fine. We were wrong. His words might have been the right ones, but the resentful delivery undermined any healing they might have offered. Still, it was more acknowledgement than I had expected. Thank you for saying that, I responded sincerely. Now tell me why you've reached out after all this time. My mother took over detailing my father's medical condition and the associated costs. The bypass surgery alone would cost $30,000 out of pocket, with additional expenses for rehabilitation and medications. They had exhausted their savings and home equity on Jackson's abandoned education and subsequent support. Insurance only covers 60%, she explained. We're looking at nearly $50,000 total that we simply don't have. We wouldn't ask if we had any other option, my father added gruffly. You always were the responsible one we could count on. He continued the statement, revealing more about their view of me than perhaps he intended. James tensed beside me, and I placed a calming hand on his arm. His protectiveness was appreciated, but this was my conversation to navigate. So, to clarify, I said slowly, after telling me I wasn't part of the family anymore, you're now approaching me for significant financial assistance. We're family hope, my mother insisted, ignoring the contradiction. Family helps family. Where is Jackson in all this? I asked. Why isn't he helping? My parents exchanged glances. He's not in a position to help right now, my father muttered. He's still finding himself, my mother added, echoing words I'd heard countless times before. As the conversation continued, the true nature of their outreach became increasingly clear. They hadn't reconnected out of regret or desire to heal our relationship. They had reached out because they needed money, and I was the most likely source. James remained a supportive presence, occasionally asking pointed questions about financial details or treatment options. His professional knowledge clearly made my parents uncomfortable, highlighting aspects of their financial management they preferred not to examine too closely. After nearly 2 hours of discussion, I had heard enough. I hadn't committed to anything despite increasing pressure from my parents for an immediate decision. I need time to think about all this, I said finally. I'll be in touch within the week. My mother looked disappointed while my father seemed resigned. As we prepared to leave, my father grasped my arm. Whatever you decide, he said quietly. It was good to see you, Hope. The sincerity in his voice, the first genuine emotion I'd heard all day, made tears prick at my eyes. Despite everything, these were still my parents. The complexity of that truth followed me out of the cafe and into James's car, where I finally allowed myself to break down completely. The week following the coffee shop meeting became a whirlwind of emotional turmoil, unlike anything I'd experienced since the initial disownment. Despite 3 years of therapy and personal growth, the interaction had reopened wounds I thought had healed and created new ones I hadn't anticipated. I feel like I'm 18 again, desperate for their approval. I confessed to Dr. Fraser during an emergency session the day after the meeting. All my confidence just evaporated when I saw them. That's a common response when reconnecting with family after trauma, she assured me. The relationship patterns are deeply ingrained. The question now is how you'll respond to those feelings as your adult self. This became my central challenge, navigating the powerful emotional undertow while making decisions aligned with my values and boundaries. I found myself oscillating between conflicting instincts. Part of me wanted to help unconditionally support my father's health needs, regardless of our past. Another part screamed warnings about repeating destructive patterns. Amanda's response to the situation was unequivocally protective. "Absolutely not," she declared when I called her the evening after the meeting. "They threw you away when you wouldn't be their ATM, and now they're only back because they need withdrawals again. Cut them off permanently." James offered a more measured perspective, neither pushing me to reconnect nor advising complete separation. "Whatever you decide, I support you," he assured me. "But make sure the decision comes from a healthy place, not guilt or obligation." Meanwhile, my professional life suffered again, as the situation consumed my mental and emotional energy. During an important presentation to potential clients, I lost my train of thought, completely standing frozen before the conference room, until a colleague smoothly intervened. My supervisor, Angela, remembering my previous family crisis, approved a week of personal leave without hesitation. "Take the time you need," she said kindly. "The work will be here when you return." During this leave, I researched my father's medical condition extensively, consulting with a college friend who had become a cardiologist. I learned that while the situation was serious, there were multiple treatment approaches with varying costs and benefits. I also discovered patient assistance programs that my parents had apparently not explored. These findings reinforced my suspicion that they had immediately turned to me rather than exhausting other options first. The situation took an unexpected turn 4 days after our meeting, when Jackson appeared unannounced in my office building's lobby. The receptionist called up, clearly uncomfortable with his insistent demeanor. "There's a young man here named Jackson claiming to be your brother," she explained. "He doesn't have an appointment but refuses to leave without speaking to you." I agreed to come down, my heart racing with a mixture of anxiety and curiosity about this first contact with my brother in 3 years. Jackson looked simultaneously familiar and strange. His physical appearance had changed: broader shoulders, the beginning of our father's receding hairline. But it was the hardness in his expression that most surprised me. The carefree younger brother I remembered had been replaced by someone visibly carrying resentment. "We need to talk," he stated without greeting when I approached. We moved to a small seating area in the lobby, maintaining a professional distance that felt symbolic of our relationship. "Dad's really sick," he began bluntly. "Mom said you haven't decided if you'll help." "I'm still considering the situation," I replied carefully. "There are many factors to weigh," he scoffed. "What factors? He could die without this surgery. Is that not enough for you?" The accusation stung, but I maintained my composure. "I'm concerned about Dad's health, of course, but I also need to consider the history between us, including being disowned for not paying your college tuition. Tuition, I'll note, that was wasted when you dropped out." His face flushed with anger. "That's what this is about. You're punishing all of us because college wasn't for me." "No, Jackson. This is about recognizing patterns. Mom and Dad cast me out of the family when I couldn't give them money. Now they want me back specifically because they need money again." Our conversation grew increasingly tense as Jackson alternated between accusing me of callousness and reluctantly acknowledging parts of my perspective. Eventually, a revelation emerged that added another layer to the complex situation. "I couldn't handle the pressure, okay," he admitted after I pressed him about leaving college. "Everyone expected me to suddenly become irresponsible, focused, perfect. I couldn't do it. I started having panic attacks before exams, couldn't sleep for days. The campus counselor said I probably have anxiety and ADHD, but I couldn't afford to keep seeing her after I left school." This disclosure shifted something in our interaction. For the first time, I saw my brother not as the entitled sibling who had benefited from parental favoritism, but as someone also damaged by our family's dysfunction, albeit in different ways. "Have you gotten any help for that since then?" I asked, my tone softening. "How? With what money? What insurance?" he retorted. But the defensive edge had diminished slightly. "I might be able to help with that," I offered. Not with cash, but connecting you with resources, maybe covering some therapy sessions. His response was unexpected and revealing. I don't need your charity therapy. I need you to help Dad. The distinction was telling. He rejected assistance aimed at his personal well-being, but demanded financial help that would indirectly benefit him by preserving the family system. Despite this insight, our conversation had opened a small window of potential connection. As Jackson left promising to let Mom and Dad know I tried, I felt the weight of the impending decision more acutely than ever. Over the next 2 days, I engaged in an intensive decision-making process. I journaled extensively, documenting my thoughts, fears, and boundaries. I created spreadsheets analyzing my financial situation, determining exactly what I could contribute without jeopardizing my own security. I consulted with a financial advisor friend about protecting my assets in case this reconnection led to escalating requests. James and I had a critical conversation about our future together and how my family might fit into it. His support remained unwavering, but he expressed valid concerns. I worry they'll take advantage of your compassion, he acknowledged, but I also understand they're your family, and that bond isn't easily severed regardless of their actions. After much reflection, I reached a decision that honored both my compassion and my boundaries. I drafted a carefully worded email outlining specific terms I would pay for my father's surgery directly to the hospital, not to my parents. I would help Jackson with therapy costs only if he committed to consistent treatment. I would not provide any additional financial support beyond these specific medical expenses, and I would expect acknowledgement of past harm and respect for my boundaries moving forward. Within hours, I received a response from my mother, expressing gratitude for the medical assistance, but subtly pushing back against the conditions, particularly those involving Jackson's mental health treatment. Jackson will come around in his own time, she wrote. He's always been independent about these things. Her response confirmed that while my decision was the right one for me, the path forward would require vigilant boundary maintenance. This wasn't going to be a fairy tale reconciliation, but perhaps it could be the beginning of a more honest, if limited, relationship. The next morning, I called James. I need to deliver this decision in person, I explained. Will you come with me? Absolutely, he answered without hesitation. When do we go? The house I grew up in looked smaller than I remembered. The once meticulously maintained lawn had grown patchy, the flower beds my mother had proudly tended now overtaken by weeds. The faded front door paint and sagging gutter spoke of years of deferred maintenance, financial difficulties made visible. James squeezed my hand as we walked the cracked concrete path to the door. Remember, this is your choice. You can change your mind or walk away at any point. My mother answered the door, surprise registering on her face, despite the fact that I had texted ahead to announce our visit. Hope and James, come in, please. Her gaze darted past us to the street, perhaps checking for others, or simply a nervous gesture. The living room had changed little since my childhood. The same beige sofa, the collection of family photos on the mantel. I noticed with a pang that pictures of me had been returned to display, as though my exclusion from the family had never happened. My father sat in his recliner looking frailer than he had at the cafe. Jackson slouched on the couch, acknowledging our arrival with a brief nod. The tension in the room was palpable as James and I took seats across from them. Thank you for coming, my father began, his voice rougher than I remembered. Your mother told me about your email. We appreciate any help you can offer. The careful phrasing neither accepted nor rejected my conditions outright. Typical of my father's approach, always leaving room for negotiation. I took a deep breath, centering myself before speaking. I've given this a lot of thought. I care about all of you despite what happened between us, but I need to be clear about my boundaries moving forward. My mother shifted uncomfortably while my father maintained steady eye contact. Jackson stared at the floor, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. I will pay for Dad's surgery directly to the hospital, I continued. I've already spoken with their billing department about arranging this. I'll also cover the essential medications for 6 months during recovery. My parents nodded, relief visible on their faces. For Jackson, I'm willing to pay for therapy with a specialist in anxiety and ADHD if he's willing to attend regular sessions. Jackson's head snapped up. I told you I don't need your therapy charity. It's not charity, I replied evenly. It's addressing the root issue rather than just treating symptoms. Your mental health challenges affect the entire family system, including the financial pressure on mom and dad. My mother began to interject, but I continued before she could derail my carefully prepared statement. What I will not do is provide general financial support beyond these specific medical needs. I won't pay off credit cards or the second mortgage. I won't fund future education unless there's a solid plan and commitment. And most importantly, I won't be part of a relationship where I'm valued primarily as a financial resource. The room fell silent as they absorbed my words. My father was the first to respond. That seems fair, he acknowledged, surprising me. The surgery is the priority right now. My mother appeared less satisfied, but nodded reluctantly. Jackson continued to avoid eye contact, his body language closed and defensive. There's one more thing, I added. I'm not your bank. I'm your daughter and sister. If we're going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, it needs to be based on mutual respect and care, not what anyone can get from the other person. The statement hung in the air, challenging the fundamental dynamic that had defined our family for decades. Of course you're our daughter, my mother said quickly. We've always loved you. You disowned me, I reminded her gently but firmly. When I couldn't give you what you wanted, you cut me out completely. That's not love. That's conditional approval based on utility. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. We were wrong. He admitted, the words seeming to cause him physical pain. I was wrong. I let anger and pride destroy our relationship. The acknowledgement, though clearly difficult for him, felt like the first genuine moment of the conversation. My mother's eyes filled with tears, not the manipulative ones I'd seen so often, but tears that suggested real regret. We missed you, she whispered. Every holiday, every birthday. I kept buying gifts for you, keeping them in a closet, hoping... Her voice trailed off, and for a moment I glimpsed the pain my absence had caused her, separate from any financial considerations. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation or a complete transformation of our relationship, but it was perhaps a first fragile step toward something more honest. Jackson remained the holdout, his posture rigid with unresolved anger. So you're the hero now, he muttered, swooping in to save the day. No one's a hero here, Jackson, I responded. We've all been shaped by patterns that weren't healthy. I'm just trying to break those patterns rather than repeating them. We spent another hour discussing practical arrangements for my father's surgery and recovery. James occasionally contributed thoughtful questions about treatment options or logistical considerations. His presence beside me provided an anchor of normalcy and perspective when family dynamics threatened to pull me under. As we prepared to leave, my father rose shakily from his chair. Against medical advice, he had continued working to help manage their debt, and the toll was visible in his exhausted movements. Thank you, he said simply, extending his hand to me. When I took it, he pulled me into an awkward but genuine hug, the first physical affection we had shared in years. The moment didn't erase the pain of the past or guarantee a healthy future, but it represented possibility. As James and I drove away, I felt neither the elation of perfect resolution nor the despair of continued rejection, but rather the complex, bittersweet reality of family, a work perpetually in progress. 1 month after our meeting, my father underwent successful bypass surgery. I visited him in the hospital, bringing the books he enjoyed, and spending quiet hours beside his bed. My mother's gratitude seemed genuine, though old patterns occasionally surfaced in comments about financial stress or Jackson's latest challenges. Jackson, to my surprise, had reluctantly agreed to therapy after a particularly difficult week, culminated in a panic attack at a job interview. Our relationship remained strained, but small moments of authentic connection began to appear between the lingering resentment. My relationship with James strengthened through the family crisis. One evening, as we walked along the Charles River, he mentioned that his lease would be ending in 2 months. I was thinking, he said casually, it might make sense to combine our living situations, if you're open to that. The suggestion both thrilled and terrified me. Despite our solid relationship, the idea of merging our lives so completely triggered old fears about entanglement and obligation. Can I think about it? I asked honestly. Of course, he replied without hesitation or defensiveness. Take whatever time you need. His response exemplified why our relationship worked so well. He respected boundaries without taking them personally. 2 weeks later, I told him yes. My professional life regained its momentum after the initial disruption of family reentry. The skills I had developed in therapy, boundary setting, emotional regulation, direct communication proved valuable in workplace negotiations and leadership. I received another promotion along with the opportunity to build my own marketing team. 6 months after my father's surgery, we attempted our first family dinner in over 3 years. The conversation remained somewhat awkward with careful navigation around sensitive topics, but without the manipulation and tension that had characterized our previous interactions. Jackson shared news about his therapy progress and a part-time graphic design course he had started. My parents discussed their more modest lifestyle adjustments and debt management plan. I talked about work achievements and cautiously introduced more details about my relationship with James. As we shared dessert, the apple pie that had been a family tradition throughout my childhood, my mother reached across the table to touch my hand. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began hesitantly, "about being valued as a daughter, not a resource. I never saw it that way before, but looking back," she paused, gathering her thoughts. "I'm sorry we made you feel that way. You deserved better." The acknowledgement wasn't perfect or complete, but it represented growth that I wouldn't have thought possible a year earlier. Looking around the table at my imperfect family, I realized that while the past couldn't be undone, the future remained unwritten. We would never have the idealized family relationship I had longed for as a child, but perhaps we could build something new, a relationship based on reality, rather than expectation with boundaries that protected everyone's well-being. The journey through family estrangement and cautious reconnection had taught me lessons I would carry forever. I learned that love without respect is merely manipulation, that saying no is sometimes the most self-affirming choice possible, that losing everything you thought defined you can lead to discovering who you truly are. Most importantly, I learned that healthy relationships, family or otherwise, must be built on mutual care rather than obligation or utility. The worth of a person never depends on what they can provide to others. If you've ever struggled with family expectations or felt valued only for what you could give rather than who you are, know that you deserve relationships that honor your whole self. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for genuine connection. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between self-respect and family expectations? Share your experience in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear this message. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, your worth is inherent, not earned through sacrifice.